Hello, everybody. My name is Christopher Bruce. I'm the Analytical Director for the Analysts DDACTS project and the Vice President of Membership and former President of the International Association of Crime Analysts. For 2 decades, I performed crime analysis within law enforcement agencies in Massachusetts, and one of the reasons I'm excited about DDACTS is because it highlights and emphasizes the importance of the crime analyst within the law enforcement agency. For those agencies that already have a crime analyst or a crime analysis unit, DDACTS can help you get more use out of that resource. And for those agencies that are just getting started with crime analysis, DDACTS can help you develop that position and maximize its use within your agency. After all, DDACTS guiding principles requires that somebody collect and manage data about crime and crashes, to use that data to identify and analyze hotspots and target areas, and later to use statistics to determine whether your DDACTS efforts were successful. All of that falls under the purview of the crime analyst. And despite the title, we have never meant the word or the term crime analysis literally. Crime analysis has always been about anything that's important to the law enforcement agency and to the community, whether it's crime or traffic collisions or calls for service, noise, disorder, and other types of social harm. Getting the benefits of a crime analyst doesn't necessarily mean that you have to staff a full-time position. Certainly not every agency across the United States could justify that. In fact, average analytical staffing across the United States tends to be 1 analyst per 1,500 UCR Part 1 crimes, or 1 analyst per 2,800 NIBRS Group A crimes, or 1 analyst per 30,000 calls for service, or 1 analyst per 70 sworn officers for the agency. For a county agency, by the way, that includes just the enforcement side, not the corrections side of the department. Now, if you do the math and your agency exceeds these numbers, then you probably should try to develop a full-time position. But if you do the math and you find that you only need half an analyst or a third of an analyst or a quarter of an analyst, that's fine. There are ways to develop that resource within your department without hiring a full-time crime analysis position. And some of those ways include assigning existing personnel like officers, dispatchers, IT personnel, or accreditation managers to an analytical role and have them do crime analysis for 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week and then another role for the rest of that time. You might also look to other agencies to help provide analysis services to you. That could be other agencies within your county or your municipality, agencies that have analysts like your GIS department or another public safety department, or you might look to another law enforcement agency within your area that might be able to provide analytical services for part of the week. You might look to interns, volunteers, partnerships with universities, funded positions through grants, or by regionalization, by multiple agencies getting together and jointly hiring a crime analyst to service all of them. However you do it, a key question you want to determine right here at the outset of your involvement in DDACTS is who is going to do the analysis for your agency. For this presentation, I want to cover the role of the crime analyst within the DDACTS process and thus within the law enforcement agency. And specifically, I want to answer 3 questions or help agencies think about 3 questions that are important. On what subjects do we need actionable information? What action should we take based on that information? And how do we ensure that the correct action is taken? The first question deals with what analysts analyze, and the second 2 questions deals with how do agencies get the most out of making use of that analysis. And I think that once we've talked about them and once we've answered them, you'll understand why the DDACTS process is important to the development of crime analysis within your department. To begin, let's talk about what analysts analyze. What subjects do you need actionable information about? Most crime analysis is directed to crimes, crashes, and other social harms as they group together, as they cluster. And so we can deal with them as a group instead of chasing down individual incidents all the time. And there are 4 major ways that social harms group together. The first is by person, either groups of people working together or individual people who are involved in a lot of crime. In this particular example we have on the screen, we have a street person who's involved in a lot of assault and theft and vandalism. And it's my goal as a crime analyst to help identify who these people are, to help prioritize them for the agency, and to collect all the intelligence that we have about them so we can determine the best strategy to address them. That strategy might be an enforcement strategy, or it might be some sort of deterrent strategy, but either way, we need to know things about these people. We need to know where they hang out, who they associate with, in an organization, who gives the orders, how do the money and goods flow through the organization, what geographic areas do they cover, what type of job and mental health and substance abuse and family history are we looking at, those sorts of things. Once we have those answers, we can find the best solution to repeat offenders and to criminal organizations. Either way, the first way that crimes, crashes, and other social harms group together is by people. The second way is by hotspot, small geographic areas that give rise to a lot of activity. And this could be individual crimes or lots of crimes grouped together, or crashes, or noise, or any other type of social harm. As a crime analyst, it's my job to identify these hotspots, predict these hotspots, and to drill down into them to identify exactly what's going on. What types of offenders are involved, what types of victims for crashes, what types of drivers, what are the causal factors, what are their environmental factors at work. So again, the police agency has all the information they need to adopt an enforcement solution or a prevention solution to these hotspots. Places are the second major way that crashes, crimes, and other social harms group together. The third is what we call in crime analysis the pattern. Two or more incidents that are related through a direct common causal factor. And very often that direct common causal factor is it's the same person committing them, so we call that a series. A series is a type of pattern. In the example on the screen, we have a series of robberies at Radio Shack stores and Subway restaurants within the Las Vegas area. And I don't know what those two location types have in common, but that's this offender's particular pathology. And so the analyst here has taken a look at where he's striking, what time of day, what day of the week, the interval between those offenses, and a variety of other factors to come up with a prediction of where and when the offender is likely to strike next. It's my job as a crime analyst to help identify these patterns as quickly as possible as they emerge so that we can stop them as quickly as possible. And that robbery series that might have gone on for 15 or 20 or 25 incidents, maybe we can cut it off at 5 or 6 and prevent all of that additional victimization. Patterns are the third major way that crimes, crashes, and other social harms group together. And the fourth way is what we call the long-term or chronic problem. And in this context, problem means something specific, as in the context of problem-oriented policing, where we have multiple incidents over a long term or in a chronic manner that have at their core some sort of common relationship to do with the opportunity for the events to happen in the first place. So it's not just one offender. It's never just one offender or one group of offenders taking advantage. It's a lot of offenders taking advantage of a common opportunity. In this particular case, we have a lot of thefts from cars along a section of road that has a lot of parking lots. And so that's the opportunity, and the lots are in close proximity to easy areas of getaway. And so what I've done is analyze them by the time of day, the type of location, the specific location, the type of property stolen, all, again, to try to find the right solution to the problem. Problems are the fourth way that crimes and crashes group together. People, places, patterns, and problems, the 4 Ps. Whatever social harm you're concerned about, whatever you put as your priority in the agency inventory that we sent you ahead of the DDACTS workshop, I guarantee you that there is some involvement of these 4 ways of grouping within that crime or crash, within that social harm. And if you can isolate and analyze and address them one by one, you can have a major impact on the overall type of incident. Each one of these 4 Ps has a different data set that's important to it, a different set of analytical techniques, a different set of analytical products and regularity of those products, a different group of people that serve as the primary audience, and most importantly, a different set of solutions. a different set of tactics and strategies that's most likely to work to address that particular area. Now, as you see, you can see I've put DDACTS in there as a way of addressing places, and that's what DDACTS is primarily about, hotspots. Although, as we'll see, it can be about these other areas as well. Now, the importance of hotspot policing, of focusing on hotspots, is something we've known about for a long time in law enforcement. I think we've known about it since ancient times, but our best quotes go back only about a little over 100 years. Here's one from 1911 from August Vollmer, widely regarded as the father of American policing, one of the founders of the IACP, and he's talking here about the importance of focusing on hotspots for crimes. And I'm sure he'd say the same thing about crashes too, although hotspots for crashes weren't much of a thing in 1911. But whether we're looking at crime or crashes, over the last century, we've spent a lot of time putting dots and pins into paper maps in order to identify where they cluster and therefore where we should focus our attention. And plenty of academic studies have shown that if we do focus attention at these hotspots, we will have reductions in crashes and crime. Of course, these days, we use more sophisticated tools to create these maps, geographic information systems. And the difficulty of these tools is one of the hurdles that an agency new to crime analysis is going to have to get over. Fortunately, we provide technical assistance in this particular area. For some agencies that want to implement DDACTS, just getting that dot on the map is going to be a vital part of their development. And if all you have is that dot on the map indicating where a hotspot is, and if you simply put additional resources in that hotspot, you will see reductions in crime and crashes. But as your sophistication with crime analysis grows, you'll be able to do more with this dot. You'll be able to subdivide it. You'll be able to determine more specifically what's happening within this hotspot. And as you do, you might find various sub-problems at work, various things that you can handle individually. Those 4 Ps that I talked about earlier. And as you're able to provide this additional context to your officers, they'll know more about what to look for when they're in the hotspot, and therefore they can multiply the effect that they're having. But I don't want to give you the wrong impression. Simple presence alone, many studies have shown, will drive down crime. If you have the resources to analyze deeper, you can drive down that crime and those crashes more by providing more specific information about what to do and who to look for. Neither crime analysis nor analysis for DDACTS is just about supplying hotspot maps to agencies. It's about supplying actionable information. And whether we're talking about people, places, patterns, or problems, hotspots, actionable information has a set of characteristics to it. It covers all the 8 W's. I'll talk about those in just a second. It considers both quantitative data and qualitative data, data from within the police agency and data that the analyst collects from outside the agency. It answers obvious questions. It makes predictions about what's likely to happen in the future. It identifies key commonalities and points of intervention, places that the agency can exert some influence or pressure to make the problem go away or at least reduce. It provides both a basis for apprehension and enforcement or prevention if that's the direction the agency wants to go. And very often, actionable information provides explicit recommendations about what to do next. This is what you should be getting from your crime analysis capability. Now, the 8 W's that I talk about are what, who, when, where, how, why, so what, and now what. Naturally, a place-based analysis focuses a lot on the question of where, but that where question is not the only important thing. Knowing where the hotspots are isn't the only goal here. Most officers already know that, basically, within most law enforcement agencies. Good analysis drills down into those hotspots to identify who is involved, what type of crime are they committing, what time of day, what day of the week, the type of location, the environment, modus operandi factors, what type of property is being stolen, what type of vehicles are being involved. And those last 2 questions, what does it all mean? What are the things that we should be focusing on, and what are the things that we should do next? These are the questions that agencies need answers to, whether they're trying to develop a DDACTS model or any other progressive policing program. Now let's talk a little bit about my second question. What should agencies do based on all of this information? How do we select the right approach? Each of the 4 Ps has a different model that works effectively within it, and those models don't necessarily work effectively across the different focus areas. For repeat offenders and criminal organizations, for instance, we might look at priority prosecution and investigation, or we might look at focused deterrence models that bring these offenders together for what might be called an intervention and offers them a carrot and stick approach, where we have law enforcement resources present that basically say to these offenders, you're at the top of our list and we're going to be focusing all of our attention on you. And on the other side of the room, various social service providers who offer help with their underlying issues. Such models have been proven to be effective in a lot of different studies. For places, we have a variety of strategies that focus on the geographic location. Hotspot policing that could involve bicycles and foot patrol and vehicle patrols. DDACTS, of course, as one of those types of hotspot policing, and CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, which can be an important part of a DDACTS model if you choose to develop it that way. CPTED focuses on how we adjust the environment in order to reduce crime and crashes, and involving somebody who's trained in CPTED or on the crash side, of course, traffic engineering, can be a powerful partnership along with enforcement as part of the DDACTS model. For focusing on patterns, we have something called the tactical response model that looks at the characteristics of the pattern and tries to find the right tactic among 3 avenues: apprehending the offender, hardening the target, or suppressing the crime through additional guardianship. And unfortunately, I don't have time to get into that in more detail right now, but I'll show you a resource at the end of this presentation where you can read more about that. For long-term or chronic problems, we have the 25 techniques of situational crime prevention. And this would be a really good time for me to introduce a resource for you. The Center for Problem-Oriented Policing. I wish all of my 4 Ps had a website that was so dedicated to solving that particular area as this one is for the problems. On this site, you can find hundreds of evidence-based solutions and methods for developing those solutions for a variety of different crime and crash and other social harm problems. The crime-specific guides on this website each take problem-specific guides each take a look at a different crime or crash or other social harm issue and give you an idea of the best strategies to analyze and to respond to it. And these guides could be a great partnership with a DDACTS model, coupling crime prevention along with the highly visible enforcement that DDACTS encourages. Now, knowing the right tactic or strategy or model to apply to a particular issue is one thing, but how do we ensure that that model is applied? I've worked with a lot of agencies where I'm convinced I could tell them that tomorrow a crime was going to happen in a specific place and time, and they still wouldn't necessarily stop it because it wouldn't be clear whose responsibility it was to take that information and apply the right strategy to it. And so we have to think about how does analysis get translated into action in the typical police agency. And there are a variety of levels, again, 4 Ps. The first level is where we think about officer initiative and supervisor initiative and community initiative, proactivity. This is where, an individual officer, a supervisor, or even member of the community, if you disseminate it to them, takes a look at the crime analysis product and says, okay, based on what this says, this is what I should do. All right, based on the fact that we have this pattern occurring at Radio Shack stores and Subway restaurants, I guess during my shift, I'll spend more time patrolling those particular locations. And that's, of course, a very good use of crime analysis because that initiative can happen immediately. An individual officer, a supervisor, or, again, a community member can take a look at a product and make an immediate decision about what to do with it that doesn't require any advanced planning or additional resources. But we don't want to rely exclusively on that initiative, because if that officer gets busy or doesn't see the product or just doesn't care, we can't ensure that anything happens with that actionable information. So at the next level, we have policies. And this isn't something that a lot of agencies do well, but it's a growing area in which agencies develop policies and standard action plans that say, when this type of information is produced, these are the things that should happen as a matter of policy. And when I say policy, I'm not talking about something that's supposed to be punitive or anything. I'm just talking about creating a culture of expectation within the agency that when actionable information is issued, everybody understands what their role is in taking action. For instance, using that robbery series again as an example, if the Radio Shack store owners and the Subway restaurant owners ought to be contacted, it ought to be within the policy that when a product like that comes out, that the crime prevention unit will take that role of contacting those owners. And that maybe the public information officer will craft a press release about the issue. And that the patrol commander will create a patrol strategy around the issue, and so forth. Now, at the third level, planning, we have a variety of collaborative processes by which people come together, look at the information that the crime analysts have created, and make a joint decision about what to do with it. One way that agencies do that is through the use of proactive units. Operational units that don't respond to calls for service, that do nothing but proactive things during their shifts. And this could be a single officer in a smaller agency to a fairly large unit at a larger agency. But the idea is to have an operational unit that is married closely with the crime analysis resource, so that every day they look at the latest analysis and then make an effective decision about what to do that day, based on what the current criminal environment is, or again, crash environment. Of course, example of one of these proactive units in the typical agency that you're not even thinking about is traffic. Right? If you have a specialized traffic enforcement unit, their whole job is to go out there and be proactive about reducing crashes. And so if they're not basing that every day on analysis on where the hotspots are, on long-term hotspots, on recently emerging hotspots, then you're missing a potential use of analysis within your department. ComStat is another way that we can plan at a collaborative level, getting people together on a regular basis for a meeting, putting up on a slide, on a board, for the latest information about what's going on, and again, making a decision about what to do about it. Too many ComStat processes are just too much about numbers and charts and so forth. Make your ComStat process focused around those 4 Ps: people, places, patterns, and problems. Discuss an ongoing issue with one of those and make a decision jointly about what you're going to do, so that everybody in the room understands what the next action will be, and you can review it later on. And the final way that we develop responses is through programs. Now, what is a program? A program is an agency commitment to do something proactive with actionable information. And this comes from the top level. And everybody in the agency understands what their role in the program is. Some of the characteristics of programs are that you have a specific plan with clear deadlines and clear responsibilities throughout the agency. You've developed an appropriate list of partners and stakeholders. You typically do it for a limited duration, and I don't mean you necessarily end the program, but you do it in stages, so that there's a start date and an end date, or at least a pause date where you take a look and evaluate what's going on. You may often have specific dedicated funding for a program, and at the end of it, you're going to evaluate how you did. And of course, this is all describing things that are important to DDACTS, and so that's why I've provided that as one of the examples on the left-hand side. The program is the ultimate way of ensuring that crime analysis is used effectively within the agency. Because you have a master plan with assigned roles, but more importantly, because you've already made a commitment to do something proactive. On the analyst side, I don't have to sit around and wonder whether all the work that I'm putting into this analysis is actually going to be used, because we've already created a plan that ensures that it's going to be used. Not many agencies, even with very sophisticated crime analysis capabilities, take the time to develop programs that ensure that analysis is used effectively. And this, again, is one of the reasons that I'm so excited about DDACTS and what it offers to the crime analysis field, as well as policing at large. Now, earlier I suggested that while DDACTS primarily focuses on hotspots, it could also help you with those other 4 Ps, and I meant that. There are ways to structure your model to ensure that it goes beyond the place. We mean the approaches word in data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety, quite literally. There are multiple ways you can structure your model. And I want to suggest a couple of different templates that you might think about as you go to develop the model within your department. The first is the classic, what we call strategic approach to DDACTS. You look at long-term crash and crime hotspots, and you try to project where those hotspots are likely to happen in the future during the period that you plan to start your DDACTS project. And then during that period, you do highly visible enforcement and directed patrols of a variety of different potential types: traffic officers, regular officers, foot officers, and so forth within those target areas. And after several months, you take a look and see whether crime and crashes went down. It's the easiest way to get started with the DDACTS model, and it's particularly for agencies that don't have a lot of analytical resources, where just identifying the hotspots in the first place would be an analytical victory. But if you want to build on that model a little bit, think about maybe the tactical approach, where you look less at long-term hotspots, at least for crimes, and more on where you're seeing emerging hotspots, patterns, effectively, places that didn't normally have very much activity, but lately we're seeing a bloom in activity. And then we can use highly visible enforcement to suppress that emerging activity. We can use traffic enforcement as a crime control measure within those emerging crime hotspots. And particularly if you can overlay those with long-term crash hotspots, you can have a reductive effect in both social harms. The problem-oriented approach to DDACTS would start with the strategic model, but instead of just doing highly visible enforcement, we would at the same time use our partnerships to try to solve some of these crash and crime hotspots in the long term. So while we're doing all the shock and awe stuff with the highly visible enforcement, the lights and the stops and contacts and so forth, at the same time, we're really drilling down into the causal factors that give rise to these hotspots and trying to find the best long-term strategies to address them. That way, when we lift the additional enforcement, crime and crashes don't just go back to the volume they were at previously. And finally, in the offender-oriented model, we use sophisticated analysis to try to identify the routes that offenders are likely taking between crimes, crime at home, crime in where they sell their stolen goods, crime and where they buy their drugs, and so forth, and use highly visible enforcement to intercept them on these travel routes. This method focuses on what we call the total stop, the vehicle stop that really is an investigation at the same time, to the limits, of course, of our constitutional obligations, and tries to identify offenders with contraband, stolen goods, weapons, warrants, and so forth, driving through these areas. Again, when married with long-term crash hotspots, this can have a reductive effect on both. This, of course, is a model that you want to take some care with, especially not to suggest any bias within your agency or within the way that you do those stops. And if there's any concern about that at all within your community, I'd suggest maybe not adopting that particular template. If you're interested in more about how crime analysis can help your agency, I would suggest our book, Building a Model Crime Analysis Program, 50 Steps for Law Enforcement Executives, that we developed for a different project, but it's been made available to you on your USB drive that we provide you as part of the DDACTS workshop. And of course, I invite you to call or email me directly if you have any questions about how crime analysis can help your agency and how to implement it, and how to use it as part of the DDACTS process specifically. I really enjoy working with agencies, small and large, to develop their analytical capabilities. And I really hope that you find that your participation in the DDACTS process helps you develop a better foundation for crime analysis for DDACTS and beyond. Thank you very much, and have a great workshop.